Hi everyone, I hope you're well. Welcome back to another Helix Tone Tricks. Today I wanted to have a look at the lower DSP usage things we can do that will normally work for most presets just to get you a little bit more out of what you're doing. Now let's just have a look at this bottom signal chain here. I'm not using this, you can see it's switched off there. But to eat up the DSP, I've got the Grammatico GSG and a delay and a plate reverb. Now the Grammatico and the reverb especially are known to eat a lot of processing power, so it will limit what we can put here. Now this is almost like an audition loop, and then we're going to drag it up to the top signal path and see what we like. I'm just going to do this. So it's just the top signal path at the moment. I'll come on to the bottom one in a second. Now if I go to put in an amp, we can only put the Supro, the Small Tweed, the Jazz Rivet 120. We can't use any Vox style amps at this point. And then the Clarity, the Ventu Electric, the Litigator and the Badonk are all we have. So there's 7 amps. So there's 7 amps. And we're going to put them up the top and see what we can get out of them. Now let's have a little look. Now I really like Tweed amps, so I'm going to start with the US Small Tweed. So I've set it how I would set some of the bigger Tweed amps in the Helix, generally more curtailed in the bass and set on the brighter side for this particular amp because it's quite mid-heavy, as you'll hear. So if I just show you a little bit of what this sounds like. That's going to be really great for cutting through. It's very middly, quite boxy, but there's not really much detail on the top and bottom. So one thing you can do is combine these into a cab and amp block in one, and then you've got 7 blocks left to do something else. We're not going to do that here. This is just to show you some cool ideas that you could make use of. Now another amp that didn't show up in the list but is also low processing power in terms of how much it uses is the 2204 mod. So I'm going to put together a budget Bonamassa Tweed and Marshall style thing here. And we've got the Kali EXT, which has a EV speaker in it. And let's put that on the cap edge. So we've got 421 to capture the bit more of the body and the Tweed amp driving up the middle, much like Bonamassa does. So you get that real crang in the Marshall at the top of the chord. And sort of the polar opposite with the Tweed sound there. Now if we put them together, now that's a 50-50 blend of both. I'm just going to pan them a little bit. So there's quite a lot of wiggle room there. You can obviously route that however you choose, but it is possible to have quite a complex dual amp rig. Cleans up quite nicely as well. So there's a lot going on there that you can just do with the guitar, and you've got a really big sound that doesn't eat everything else. Now let's have a look at a couple of the other ones. For some reason the Voxes have come back. So these are also low DSP usage. So the AC15, the A30 Fawn. So you got a few Vox models to choose from there, and surprisingly the matchless both channels, not the jumped, but both channels are low DSP usage. And then you've also got the divided by 13 and the Dr. Z. So there's quite a few choices for that AC30 derived tone. Then another one that's really useful is this placator clean. So I'm going to put that in our top signal path where the small tweed was. Now this is just the placator clean. It's got a bright switch, which is really handy for setting it for humbuckers or single coils. And then I'm just going to turn the presence and treble back. This does a surprisingly good midway between blackface and tweed clean tone. And again, really low DSP usage, so you can get loads out of that. Obviously, all of this can be controlled by snapshots as well. You could even have 1 amp as your clean tone and 1 amp as your dirty tone and have a channel switching setup there. And then let's have a look at some of the lower usage effects. So I've stuck on a second stereo plate reverb there on the lower signal path, just to show you what options we start to lose as things get a bit intense. We've got in terms of delays, I love delays. One of the lowest DSP delays is this duct delay, which is actually really useful because it's got a high and low cut on it. So you can set this up to basically emulate any delay you'd like, apart from maybe some of the dual delays. Though if you go in stereo, you could possibly do that. So basically you want to turn the ducking down, the threshold down, and just to be safe, let's turn those down as well. Now it should basically respond like a normal delay. At the moment it's a pretty clean digital delay, much like the real thing. Going to turn the mix down, let's go 28. Now if you want some kind of very low DSP approximation of the halo kind of thing, put the scale to 75% with a stereo delay. So you don't get the crossover that you get with something like the crisscross, but it's not using anywhere near as much processing power as some of the more intense delays. Now, if you want to make that sound like a tape delay, you just bring that high cut down to 2.8 kilohertz, bring the low cut up to around 250, and let's keep the scale a bit higher there. Now, if we put the small tweed back into that matchless, you can hear that noise that's just come in there. That is not the hum, it's the ripple. So if you hear that, that's actually the power supply being emulated in the Helix. So we can get rid of that. But now it gets out of the way, much more like a tape delay would. Let's just restore these settings to something like that. If I just undo that high cut quickly, you can hear the delays are a lot more present, even though we haven't turned the mix up. So that's a great way to get them out of the way using the same block. You can do this on the mod chorus echo and a fair few other delays. So it's still pretty versatile, even though we're using next to no processing power. Now that lets you use some pretty expansive reverbs, but we've also got some less expansive reverbs as well. So something like the Ganymede, which is based on the mod setting of the Boss RV5. It's a really nice reverb. Loads of people use this, especially in worship. So what I'm trying to say here is, if there's a tone that you're after and you've run out of DSP, there's normally something else that can get pretty close to the point where you make minimal compromise, if any compromise. So for plenty of things, that Ganymede will be fine. It's got quite a long decay as well. That's basically infinite at that point. In terms of other effects you can use, a lot of the modulation, it's only really the poly detune there that's a little bit more DSP intensive. Even in stereo, you can still have a lot of the effects. From memory, everything above, from the phases upwards, is very low DSP, so you can almost always use them, even in stereo. The rotary is pretty DSP intensive, so unless you specifically need a rotating speaker sound, maybe use a chorus with the speed and width quite high. Just quickly show you that. Let's turn that reverb off. Sorry, the speed high, but the depth not very high. And then, of course, because the speaker will be rotating, you wouldn't really have any dry sound in there. And, of course, you can set that up how you like. But, yeah, so there's a load of low DSP stuff in here. The deluxe comp can be set up to basically work like any of the other compressors and is by far the lowest processor intensive one. So a Dynacomp would have a ratio closer to 20:1, and you can set the threshold still. The attack would be really fast. The release, I normally set it at 50 milliseconds, just so you get that kind of modern recovery between the notes rather than it compressing a little too much. So you can actually tweak it to sound like a better version of the Dynacomp if you so please. So yeah, it's not going to sound exactly the same, but you can approximate it. Then with the distortions quickly, basically all of them, even with quite an intense signal chain like we've got down here. But if you're generally saving DSP wherever you can, you should be able to use whatever you like, as long as you know what sound you're going after. I hope this was helpful. Let me know how you get on, and please like and subscribe if you found this content useful. I'll catch you in another video soon. Thanks so much for watching.